Good evening. Just been to see a film, obviously. I'm not in my usual parking space though. I'm over one because when I arrived, someone was in my parking space. Absolute scenes. I'm a little bit emotional. I've just been to see a new film called The Duke, which stars Jim Broadbent and Helen Mirren and is based on the true story of a man from Newcastle who in 1961 stole a painting of the Duke of Wellington by the artist Goya from the National Gallery. But he didn't steal it to sell it, he stole it to raise some money for the greater good, as he called it, basically to help other people. So Jim Broadbent plays Kempton Bunton, which was the fella's real name, and somebody even says in the film that's not even a real name. You don't get a lot of Kempton Buntons, and you certainly didn't get them in 1960s Newcastle, but this fella was Kempton Bunton, and he had a very strong sense of social justice. So he was campaigning for free TV licenses for older people. He just wanted the world to be a bit more fair, not for himself but for others. And yeah, after seeing on the news that this Goya had been kept in Britain at great expense so the public could see it, he decided he would borrow it for a short time to sort of get some attention for his various campaigns. So Jim Broadbent plays Kempton. His wife Dorothy O'Dolly is played by Helen Mirren. And it is very much that classic British comedy drama. But for me, it has that extra level of meaning because it's set in the city I'm from. It's actually set mainly in Benwell, which is right next to where I grew up. I've got family around that part. And I saw an interview, no, I didn't see an interview, I heard an interview on the Entertainment podcast with Helen Mirren. And she said, when you see stories of the 1960s told, more often than not, it's 1960s London that you see. Either, swinging 1960s London or working class 1960s London, but it's always London. To see the Newcastle of 1961 on a big screen was just such a wonderful experience because my dad was born in... Oh, I'm going to get upset. My dad was born in 1956, so in 1961 he would have been 5. And you see kids playing in the street, and it just occurred to me that what I was seeing was a snapshot of the Newcastle that my dad grew up in, that he was a child in, which I've never really thought about before. And another thing that occurred to me was, I was looking at, it's Newcastle 1961, it's 20 years before I was born, and it just made me think of how much it had changed by the time I came along, but then the things that were the same and the bits that are different now that I'm 40 and, we're 40 years on from when the film takes place. So yeah, that really resonated with me, the seeing a 1960s Newcastle, hearing lovely Geordie accents, and hats off to both Jim Broadbent and Helen Mirren in the leads. Their accents are absolutely superb. In fact, nobody's accent in the film grated on me, and more often than not when something is set in the northeast, somebody gets cast that isn't from up there and the accent's terrible. Yes, I'm talking about Billy Elliot's older brother in Billy Elliot, which I absolutely love, but his older brother's accent is terrible. So yeah, the accents are spot on. Just, it's so, for me, authentic in its portrayal of the people and the streets and what the houses were like and the kitchens. And Helen Mirren is a Geordie woman in her perhaps late 50s, early 60s, and Helen Mirren's quite a glamorous woman, albeit a glamorous older woman, but she looks every inch the Geordie housewife. you know, with our rollers and our pinny and our, you know, just everything, and our slippers, everything about it was just so authentic. The interplay between her and Jim Broadbent as husband and wife is just delightful. The back and forth. Their son is called Jackie, which, you know, was the fella's real name, but it's like, of course there's a Jackie knocking about. The family are also dealing with grief, so there is quite a sad undertone to it, but it's beautifully handled. Like, I genuinely, I can't fault this film. It's an hour and 36 minutes long. It looks great. It's heartwarming. It's moving. It's incredibly funny. I will say that there was a couple of gags that I mean, I'm a bit of a bugger for laughing loudly during films anyway, if I'm amused, but there was a couple of gags that I laughed louder at because I think they resonated more with me than anybody else in there, because I may well have been the only Northeasterner. But it works for everybody. It's so charming and warm and funny, and I would watch it again in a heartbeat. It makes me really sad that my dad's not here to see it, because I know he would really enjoy it. Not just because it shows him the Newcastle of his childhood, but because it's beautifully written, beautifully observed, well shot, well crafted. And it's such a lovely message of, you know, looking out for one another, making sure everybody's got what they need, putting others first, you know, all that sort of, it's a real celebration of community. And this man, Kempton Bunton, which is a name I'll never forget now, just believed that everybody deserved a fair shot. People should be treated well, you know, treat others the way you want to be treated yourself. And he's just a good egg, like through and through, a really, really good guy who, like I say, didn't want fame or riches, but he liked to make a fuss if it got attention for the things that he believed in. One final thing I have to say is that my own stage husband, Mr. Charlie Richmond, makes an appearance at the beginning of the film as an officer coming round collecting, or, you know, checking people have got that TV licence. Two of them come and knock on the door, and of course Kempton doesn't have one because he doesn't agree with it. And I found out, I think it was yesterday on social media, that Charlie was in the film, and it was just such a joy to be sat there in the Odeon in Kettering and look up at the screen and see lovely Charlie, who I shared a stage with when we did Oliver in sixth form, in lower sixth, the Sacred Heart St Cuthbert's legendary production of Oliver. He played Mr. Bumble, and I played his bit of stuff, Widow Corney. So for the 1 week that we performed, I got to share a stage with him, and he went on to be in, he's been in other films, he's been in numerous plays, he does the Panto in Newcastle every year at the Time Theatre and Opera House, and he's, I mean, admittedly, I haven't seen him for a very long time, but he is and was an absolute joy to know. So yeah, it was a real buzz seeing him up there as well. Yeah, please go and see it. It doesn't matter if you're from the Northeast or not. It is a perfectly crafted, wonderfully charming, warm and funny British film, and everybody should see it. Really uplifting and joyous, and yeah, can't recommend it highly enough. It is utterly delightful. That's me done. I'm going home. Don't know what I'm seeing next, but obviously when I do, I'll sit in this car parking space or that car parking space, and I'll talk about it for you lovely people. Thanks for watching. Katie out.